There's no point in lengthy intros. You've seen the title, you know what we're doing. What is the worst level in every Super Mario game? I've already tried to separate this question from the somewhat similar what is the hardest level in every Mario game. As well, it is understandable that after your 50th try of the perfect run, you really don't like it so much anymore. That doesn't mean it is a bad level per se. It's well designed, it's fair, it's just very hard. And that's not to say there won't be any annoyingly hard levels here, but not just because they're hard, but because they feel unfair, unfun, or in other ways kinda suck. That's all for later. First, we start with the original Super Mario Bros. Ask anyone at Nintendo what Mario's core design philosophy is, and they will answer the exact same thing. Fun. Nintendo's entire mission statement is to put smiles on our faces, and Mario is the embodiment of that sentiment. His games may not always be hard or anything difficult, but they should at least be fun, and that has so far succeeded way more often than not in the core Super Mario games. However, there are very few levels that go more against that grain than World 7-4 from the original Mario Bros. This is the second level in the game which is effectively just pick a path, and whereas the first, World 4-4, at least keeps it short with one pick a path, 7-4 has 3 back-to-back. Since there is absolutely zero indication what to do here, it's effectively just guessing, hoping for the best, which leads to a very unique situation in the Mario series. No matter whether you know the path or not, this level is never fun. If this is your first time playing or you simply haven't remembered the right path and refuse to look it up, you are forced to try again and again. Yeah, good luck. Eventually you'll get it, but you'll find it completely random, arbitrary, and most of all, not fun. If you do know the path, you can just breeze through it. It's not like it's actually difficult due to enemy placements or precise platforming or whatever. So then, it's also not fun. It's less annoying and way faster, but it's still not fun. Which means that no matter whether this is your first time or your 50th time playing, 7-4 is never good and never fun, and therefore it is easily the worst level in the original Mario Bros. And from a design standpoint, one of the worst the series has ever seen, if you ask me. However, to a certain extent, you could make the argument that the Lost Levels is essentially an entire game filled with this design philosophy. It doesn't make for a good game, it makes for one that barely feels official. But alas, one level has to be the worst of the worst when it comes to feeling unfair, as this game does quite a lot. And that level, I would say, is World C3, a redo of World 7-3. This is one of those levels introduced in this game that are heavy on wind, which would be a decently interesting mechanic later down the line, but was absolutely abysmal in the Lost Levels. And that has all to do with the fact that in order to ride this wind, you need to use the souped up springs found throughout these levels that shoot you all the way up in the air while flying through the stage towards the next faraway platform. And as a result, you are out of frame for nearly the entire level, high above the ceiling of the screen. I can't be the only one who hates platforming when I can't see my character, right? And then you also have the wind to mess you up while you can't even accurately see where you are. World C3 also adds Lakitus to the mix, further making the whole thing feel unfair. But the real cherry on top is a glitch in the original version of the game, the Japanese Famicom version. Due to the fact Lakitu can spawn infinite Spinies, it is possible for the maximum number of sprites available to be filled up before you get to a certain point in the level, and if that happens, springs stop spawning, meaning that you can now no longer complete the level. So not only is it an annoying level and an unfair level, it's also a potentially glitchy level. It's the holy trifecta of being bad. For our Western version of the second Super Mario Bros. Game, we find another level that feels utterly devoid of fun. World 6-2 requires you to traverse a level that is mostly bottomless pits, save for a few small platforms. In order to reach those, you need to ride on the back of the albatross enemy found in high numbers, but that also means this level is another example of the worst of both worlds. On one hand, the controls of this game are way too stiff and rough for platforming this accurate. Landing on the back of a moving bird is not easy at all, especially later down the line when you need to dodge inbound flying enemies. But if you finally landed on the back of a bird, it suddenly becomes super boring, because you're just riding along the black background towards victory without having to do a whole lot. It's almost more like a puzzle, except the solution is super easy, and once you found it, you need to wait another 2 minutes for the level to actually end. Just a poorly thought out idea at this level, it should have never existed. So far, we've had it quite easy, ragging on games that most people agree haven't aged well. But SMB3, the next game in line, is much more beloved, and for good reason. There are so many levels in this game that are absolute quality. However, some of the same problems we saw with the first 3 games are also still present in the ironically named 4th entry. Particularly in World 7's first fortress. I genuinely have no clue how anyone was supposed to figure this out without a guide. The level leads you along for a few empty moments before hoping you realize you've hit a dead end. And once you do, you're supposed to backtrack, hit a bunch of random blocks like it's Mario Maker, and find a hidden P-switch which will reveal an invisible door. Peak level design. Then, you must collect a Tanuki suit in the next room, take a pipe to the one you've already been to, and fly to the ceiling to find another well-hidden pipe. Fight Boom Boom, end of stage. It's a nightmare to finish if you have no idea where to go, it's a snooze fest if you do. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? The lessons had yet to be learned at this point, but going forward we wouldn't really see levels like this again, so it seems like SMB3 finally did it. And thus, archaic as Super Mario Land may feel, it in fact does not have mechanics like this. But that definitely doesn't mean it's safe from my criticism. It's no secret that this is probably the Mario game that has aged the worst. It is simply incredibly stiff and feels very difficult to play in the modern day. Mario's movement is a real nightmare if you're not used to it. Fortunately, Super Mario Land is hardly a difficult game and doesn't rely on too tricky platforming. Everywhere but World 3-free. This is really one of the only stages in this game that asks you to do some serious, focused, precise platforming among flying lifts and donut blocks. And surprise surprise, it's more frustrating than fun. At the very least though, this is the first questionable winner of this video that isn't a poorly designed level. It has to be worth something. It would be a completely fine course in a newer game with better controls. It's purely the archaic nature of Super Mario Land that makes free annoying to get through. I said at the start of this video that I think there is an important difference between a hard level and a bad level, but when it comes to Super Mario World we see a perfect example of how those concepts can overlap. Tubular is a special zone stage, meaning only for the best of the best, yet I do think it kinda pushes it too far. This entire level has barely any ground to stand on, asking you to traverse it using either a cape feather or, the intended way, a pea balloon. And as such, the level doesn't really test whether you're a good Mario player. It essentially becomes a completely different game. You could be a great platformer, easily tackling any problem a traditional platform level throws at you and still absolutely suck at this, because the pea balloon gameplay and the way you're meant to use it in Tubular is so different from the core Mario style. This is far from the only Mario game that does something like this, asks you to suddenly become a master at a mechanic that was before barely used in the game at all. And I always kinda dislike it, but Tubular is easily one of the hardest and worst offenders of this trope. And in a game like Super Mario World, not exactly packed with bad levels, it quickly stood out to be the worst of the bunch. And judging by its reputation, I doubt I'm alone in that. Speaking of reputation, this next one also has a bit of an infamous side to it. As far as a level from the often overlooked Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins can be infamous of course. Star Course, the second level of the Space Zone, is well known for how many unsuccessful elements it puts together. First off, this level is one of the slowest auto-scrollers I have ever seen. I've always disliked auto-scrollers in Mario in general, but this is easily the worst of all, simply because basically nothing happens at all. It moves so slow, there is barely any pressure, and the only thing to avoid are stars that feel completely randomly placed, which you need to dodge in the typical low gravity style of Space Zone, which in and of itself isn't really fun to play either. It further slows things down to a crawl. The stage is then capped off by a fight against the Tanga, which isn't the worst thing ever, but it's not even remotely enough to redeem one of the most mind-numbing Mario experiences of all time. And with that, we enter the 3D era, as Super Mario 64 is up next. I was originally a little divided as to how to tackle the 3D games in this video, constantly switching winners depending on how you look at it. For example, I think the worst world is Rainbow Ride, simply due to how slow it is and how disconnected the whole thing feels in a game that thrives on its mini sandbox nature. But then I thought, well, this isn't about worlds, this is about levels, so I should pick the worst star. And then, my first instinct was to go for basically every coin star because they all suck. Having to collect 100 coins in a world is not fun, especially in worlds like Shifty Sands Land and Tiny Huge Island, which are low on coins to begin with, making the whole thing extremely tedious. But that also is not really the same thing. So I figured, I need to pick one specific star, or for future-proofing, Shine Sprite or Moon or whatever. And that star for me has to be the Tower of the Wing Cap. Maybe it's me and how poor I am at flying Mario without a cannon to get me started, but I absolutely hate this level. I suck at it so bad. I've tried it so many times over the course of my life, and I swear I can count the times I've beaten it on one hand. The complete lack of awareness of where you or the red coins are, the controls of Wing Mario, the fact you have to return to the platform to collect the star, and the absolute rage I feel every time I'm tossed out of this level and return to the lobby so I can't even easily try again, I hate it. I really hate it. On a personal level, this is one of my least favorite Mario levels ever. Objectively, it's not, but I still think it's Mario 64's worst star, even without my bias. Now, so far I've been quite to the point in this video, not dwelling too much on honorable mentions and other candidates. After all, there are more than enough 2D and 3D games as is. I'm not trying to take up your time any longer than necessary. But for Mario Sunshine, I really can't avoid naming some other candidates than just my winner. This game is infamous for its worst aspects. Ask people to name their worst Mario levels and you have a good chance several of Sunshine's most annoying Shine Sprites are all in contention. The one of the notorious trio I have the least problems with is probably Corona Mountain. Do I recognize this idea absolutely sucks? Yes, I do. It's not fun to play and it's not a great addition to the late game. But did I really struggle with it to the point it became annoying? No. Now, don't get me wrong, Corona Mountain in one of the later games would have been that title's worst for sure, but Sunshine, it has worse on offer. Like the lily pad ride. This one feels so incredibly weird to play, the mechanics of FLUDD really aren't well suited to something so delicate as this. Within a modern game, it wouldn't be the absolute worst. What absolutely kills it though is that if you game over, which happened quite frequently in Sunshine, you're not likely to be super high on lives usually. You have to re-enter the level from Al Delfino, meaning you have to transport Yoshi all the way back from the mainland using multiple boats once again. That in and of itself was worthy of a reward, but rather than the shine you deserve, you get a level that is not fun to play and just as easy to screw up for reasons that feel out of your hand. Speaking of which, my winner for Sunshine is none other than the horror that is the Pachinko level. I don't think there has ever been an official Mario stage or location that felt as janky as this. Everything about this Pachinko feels like hell to get in contact with. The slopes are weird, the camera is weird, the design of the level is weird, and worst of all, it is unforgiving as all hell, having a bottomless pit at the end that will force you to start all over again if you mess up even once. And when I say all over again, I mean re-enter the level, which also requires you to wait for a boat. You can't enter the level without one. Anyone who has ever played this level will know how terrible it is, and even those who haven't will probably know at this point, because it's without a doubt one of the series' most infamous stages ever, for good reason. You know what's worse than an autoscroller? An unforgiving, relatively difficult autoscroller, because that means you have to start over again and can't exactly speed up your progress now that you know what's coming. Cue World 8's second tower from New Super Mario Bros. This game introduced the snake block levels that we have since seen more often, where you have to follow along with the traveling platform in order to reach its destination. But while the first level in the game to focus on this gimmick at least gave you a chance to re-find your footing if you lost it, this one does not. It's a vertical level with spikes everywhere, so if you fall you'll probably either die, or if you happen to get lucky, will be completely unable to regain your footing, which is effectively the same thing anyway. And because this is a relatively late game level, the difficulty is actually decently high. It's not a cakewalk like some other autoscrollers tend to be, meaning the risk of dying and having to start all over again is very much present. There is a checkpoint at least, I will say that, but it doesn't do much to change my opinion unfortunately. Next up, Mario Galaxy, which is a very difficult one I admit, because most of the stars in this game are perfectly fine at absolute worst. So I had to do some real digging here, thinking about my past experiences with the game and which levels left less than ideal impressions with me during earlier playthroughs for reasons that might not always come up. And one of the answers that really popped out was Bubble Blast Galaxy. but only on Switch. This is essentially a large wire loop game, where you must guide Mario through an electric maze while he's in a bubble. It means you are afforded zero mistakes and are entirely dependent on the Wii pointer, which is exactly why the Switch version sucks so bad. The pointer here, it's serviceable, and that's me being generous. I always try to use it as little as I can. But a level entirely dependent on you actually being decently good at it, yeah, that's above the Switch's pay grade. It's simply not accurate enough, too janky to be able to do this level in a way that doesn't quickly become frustrating, again, as a result of the control scheme rather than your own inability to do this. On the Wii, the level is fine, but on the Switch, it's easily Galaxy's worst, I'd say. So, we have at this point established that I dislike auto-scrollers, I dislike waiting, and many other elements that mess around with Mario's movement in ways that don't feel optimal. So take a guess at my opinion on water levels. I don't hate them, let's get that right, but I do all across the board find them less fun than regular levels. I don't like the way they control it all, it doesn't really matter too much which game we're talking about. In this case though, we have landed at New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which had the brilliant idea to take another water level and make it dark. Now obviously this isn't Mario Maker pure darkness, there are lights around, but purely based on idea alone, this level should have never left the planning phase. I will admit though, for how terrible of an idea this is, it isn't god-awful. The theming has a certain vibe to it, and it could have been much worse than it ended up being. But in a game that is pretty inoffensive all across the board, it stands out as the weakest stage. And that's a sentiment we'll be talking about a lot more sooner rather than later. But first, Super Mario Galaxy 2. Far from milquetoast, obviously, but compared to Mario Galaxy, I struggled less to find my winner for the worst star in this game. And that is because I really don't like the way Fluzzard controls. Earlier levels featuring this bird were already not ideal, but at least they were manageable to a decent extent. What I really dislike about specifically Fleet Glide Galaxy though, is that it basically forces you to learn the route. The gates you have to fly through occasionally follow each other up so quickly with so little time in between that unless you know where to go, you're likely to miss it. It's not often that Mario games essentially force you to learn the path of a level, and the fact that one of the few stages that does it is one that doesn't even feel fun to play, makes it a definitive standout for me, in a negative sense of the word. Fortunately, the second star, the racing one, is less of a problem as this is more about speed rather than accuracy and flying exactly through the gates. That suits the slightly janky controls of Fluzzard a lot better. Not too dissimilar from the first Galaxy in that regard, huh? Super Mario 3D Land is up next, and this one, yeah, this is a definition of inoffensive and milquetoast. Even those that love this game must admit that it's a very by-the-books Mario experience, and it also really shows when looking at it through the topic of this video. 3D Land doesn't really have bad levels, honestly. Creating a bad level requires taking risks, and that risk then backfiring. 3D Land doesn't take risks, it plays everything incredibly safe, and that leads to a game where all levels blend together and there are barely any standouts, in positive or negative sense. But hey, I had to pick one, and that ended up being Special World 4-1. Unlike many Special World levels in this game, this is not a rehash of a past stage, being completely original, which I suppose is praiseworthy, but that's about where it ends. Look at this footage. Does this look fun to you? Imagine you are in World 12 at this point, having played so many stages, and this is what you're playing now. Rarely have levels ever made me reconsider the quality of a game, what you're doing with your time, as much as this one. I remember I saw someone call this the epitome of the dullness that is Mario 3D Land, and I 100% agree. Well, New Super Mario Bros. 2 is hardly a game that takes a lot more risks and dares to be something revolutionary. At the very least, it had a more specific focus, with the coin theme and all. Not that that has in any way, shape or form to do with the worst level, but still. Instead, I think the worst level is a massive outlier in this video. For the first time, I'm gonna pick a boss fight. Because, oh man, the boss fights in this game are incredibly poor. The wrestlers in the early game barely qualify as bosses, I don't even think it's possible to be defeated by them, while the final boss, spoiler alert, it's Bowser, is an auto-scroller of all things. Look, I do admire that this is one of the only Mario final bosses that requires you to do actual platforming, but making that an auto-scroller was not a good call whatsoever. Not to mention that the journey through Bowser's castle is not super exciting either. We have another snake block section, you know how I feel about those now, and the Koopalings appear for another part that wants you to take things at a snail's pace. Now, I get Mario is not Sonic, we're not always meant to go super fast, but as has become abundantly clear today, I don't like having my movement severely restricted in a platformer. And Bowser's Castle in NSMB 2 does that in several ways every few minutes. Although I don't think New Super Mario Bros. U has such an egregious case as the last one, it's very much in line with 3D Land in the sense of how every level is incredibly safe and it doesn't take enough risks to really annoy the player. Well, in almost all levels. From a creative standpoint, I really like Don't Touch Anything, one of the challenges this game has. It could never work in an actual game, for obvious reasons, but it feels like a Mario Maker stage before Mario Maker was a thing. And then you play it, and think, oh, this is cool. But then you have to try again, and again, and again. Because past the halfway point, it really starts to ramp up in difficulty, as Lakitus hang above your head and pelt you with spinies. Now, I know I said earlier that a difficult level that is fun to play doesn't belong on the list, and I still believe that. But Don't Touch Anything, I think, is too difficult for its own good. The simplicity of the level, severely hampered only by the unconventional limitations, make it have that unfair vibe to it, even if that is maybe not entirely justified. It does sour the experience though in the end, which is a shame, because again, the idea is good and it starts out nicely. It just kinda loses track of what is most important about this challenge about halfway through, and turns into a sort of monster that makes you actively hate the limitations that excited you not long before. In my eyes, 3D World is in everything a better version of 3D Land, and that shows once again here as well. In essence, this game too has 0 actually bad levels, and unlike 3D Land, it also has a bunch of stellar ones as well. Great experience across the board. But one must always close out the ranking, and in this case I nominate Chain Link Charge for that position. This is an auto-scroller, which works even worse in 3D than they do in 2D, and it's not even an exciting one at that. The setting and environment is bland grassland, and the main gimmick are the chain link fences the stage gets its name from. But these are hardly something innovative either, they have existed since Super Mario World, and this level does very little to justify their repeated presence. Out of all 3D World stages, this one feels most like it belongs in 3D Land, and that is not a good thing for a game that does basically everything better. Next, we're gonna skip past Super Mario Run, as well that is maybe technically a mainline 3D Mario game, every level in this title is more or less the same thing. So I'm not gonna replay every single one of them to find the auto runner that is a little worse than the rest of the auto runners. So Mario Odyssey is next, where we will decide the worst moon of them all. And that is, without a shadow of a doubt, the beach volleyball minigame in the Seaside Kingdom. Having to jump rope 100 times is already not easy, but at least it can be relatively easily cheesed using the scooter. This one is a lot harder to wiggle your way out of playing as intended. Not to mention that even if you take both as they come, so play them fair and square, that volleyball is definitely harder and much easier to screw up than jump rope, I'd say. But since there's not really much more to say about it, I want to take this moment to also pick a worst kingdom. And this definitely has to go between the two undercooked kingdoms, the Ruined Kingdom and the Cloud Kingdom. Whichever is worse depends on the way you look at it. The Ruined Kingdom hurts more. This has such potential to be a super memorable location in the Mario world, but instead it leaves you feeling like you wanted more. But at the same time, if you take it at face value, it's much cooler, much more interesting than the Cloud Kingdom, which is also undercooked, but also a theme we get in nearly every game. As such, it does even less to leave an impression, and doesn't feel remotely as interesting to step foot in. So yeah, Cloud Kingdom wins for me. And last but not least, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. All the levels are really good, and most impressively, despite taking a boatload of risks, this game doesn't really swing and miss. Even the auto-scrollers have fun mechanics to them that make them pretty good, for an auto-scroller. It's only when you start to look at the alternative ways to collect Wonder Seeds that you reach some duds. All search parties are not super exciting, especially not to play alone, but Empty Park is easily the worst offender. Like the name implies, this level is completely empty until you start jumping around and realize there are blocks hidden throughout that will lead you to Wonder Tokens you're hunting for. I thought we were past the stage where official Mario stages felt like Mario Maker rejects, but apparently not. While it's definitely not as bad as Mario Maker can get, this level definitely feels like its intention was for you to get some friends together, organize a search party, and start wildly jumping everywhere to find the hidden blocks. But alone, or even with 2 people, it's not fun. It's not hard, it's not challenging, it's not a puzzle, it's just guessing. You guess, and then you guess correctly, and you get a reward. How is it possible that both the first Super Mario Bros. Game and the latest both have the same problem making up their worst stage? Truly full circle stuff. But okay, that has been every game. What do you think the worst levels in the Mario series are? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Mario content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.